Dr. Vonda Wright, a renowned orthopedic surgeon and longevity expert, is redefining how we think about aging.
It's such a myth. I truly believe to the depth of my heart that we can be healthy, vital, active, joyful long into the foreseeable future.
Vonda shows us how movement, strength, and mindset can transform the way we live at every stage of life.
Those little bites of exercise are actually incredibly beneficial.
Vonda and I discuss the vital role exercise plays in longevity.
Women have been taught for many years to lift really light weights, a lot of repetitions, and God forbid we ever build muscle. We don't want to get heavy. You're not going to get heavy and bulky unless that is your goal.
And how to burn belly fat faster.
The priorities in midlife is to build muscle mass, so you have to eat enough high quality protein to do that. So what is that?
I'm Sarah Grynberg, and this is A Life of Greatness.
Vonda Wright, what made you want to get into medicine?
Oh, we're going way back, Sarah. I love that. I love that you've asked me that. You know, my original career in medicine was as a cancer nurse. And so I've always thought that I would end up helping people, but I'm of a generation of women that we're told you can be anything and do anything. And yet we didn't have that many examples in front of us, actually, of orthopedic surgeons, certainly. But I was a smart kid and was directed towards medicine. So out of university, I spent the first 6 years as a cancer nurse. I got a master's degree in cancer nursing, and then came to a decision point after learning so much at a really critical time in my life about taking care of people and people in this dire straits of their lives. I came to a point where I needed to decide what was next. And ultimately, after a lot of searching and interviewing, I decided, number one, I needed to take care of people. And number two, I needed to do good research. And being a clinical scientist, a doctor who does research, was one way to do it. And so that's what I've spent my career from 1995, when I went back to medical school at 28, until now doing.
You were young when you were a cancer nurse. You were only 23. That must have been quite a full-on job for you to have, but one that I have no doubt that you learned a lot from.
You know what, I think, honestly, as I reflect now and talk about it sometimes, being a cancer nurse at 23 years old, at the time, two things were happening. Number one, we weren't as good then as we are today at curing cancer, creating survivors, right? So although we still have a long ways to go, we still weren't as good as it then. And so people would come into the hospital during a 6-month course of treatment. They would come in and be in the hospital every month for a whole week for 6 months. And so on top of that, it was a type of nursing at that time called primary nursing, so that if you would come in every month to have your chemotherapy, I would always take care of you. So month after month, I got to, at 23 years old, develop really deep clinical relationships with people. And you cannot be unchanged as a 23-year-old who's forming her opinions about life and about what's important in life, if you're taking care of people who are just battling it out, right? And so I have lots of amazing stories of people getting through their chemotherapy, walking out with their families and living the lives that they always wanted to have. I have stories about, in the middle of the night, chemotherapy is pushed in the middle of the night. And as I was doing that, treating usually the women I was taking care of, they would be on Home Shopping Network or QVC ordering stuff off. It was on the TV at that point. And sometimes I thought, what are we doing that for? But the fact of the matter is they were just trying to be normal women, normal for them, right? So in the midst of the most unnormal situation possible, they were trying to be normal people. So I think your observation that really colored my whole worldview is spot on.
And what have you taken with you about life from having that role?
I think so many things. I think from the very superficial level of, I could really care less about a lot of the trappings of wealth and success that we all work so hard for. Like, for instance, I bought this house 3 years ago in this neighborhood I live in now, and the other lady was such a good interior designer. I just left all her stuff up because I don't care, right? It's good enough for me. Or, you know, sometimes my poor children, we have a blended family of children. If someone's not literally dying, sometimes my response is, okay, you're going to be fine. Let's just move on with it. If a bone is not sticking out or we're not seriously ill, come on, people, we're going to get through this. So from a superficial level, it's changed me like that. From a really deep level, I think those patients when I was 23, and I was counting the other day because we can talk about this too. I think it's really important who you listen to and the point of view they come with. I think that's what you're asking me. I have taken care of in my career probably 100,000 people because I've had a very long career. I've been taking care of people since 1990 as a nurse, and then there was a brief break, and then from 1995 until now, 100,000 people. You cannot have an unchanged worldview or a point of view that's different when you've looked 100,000 people in the eye, when you've taken care of their families alongside them. And so it's given me the point of view that death is not always the enemy. It's given me the point of view that I am really tired of women telling me in my clinic, even yesterday, oh, Dr. Vonda, I have a very high pain tolerance, but I just couldn't do this anymore. And I say to myself and them, why do you know that? Why is it okay for you to have suffered for years, right? And listen, I'm a sports doctor. I don't like people to be mamby-pamby. I like them to be full of grit and um, full of hardiness. But at some point, why are we okay with women suffering? I mean, it just gives me so many. Listen, you ask these kinds of questions, I can go on and on forever.
I find that so fascinating, and I think, it's such a gift almost that you did go through that because of the insight that you have. I mean, it's just, we always get told that we should be grateful for what we have, and it's not so much about external things. But being in a role like that is where you really are at the cold face of what matters in life. And thank you for sharing those words because I just think they are really meaningful. We get caught up in bullshit, Vonda. Like we honestly do. And I see myself do it. I know better than that. And I'll get so caught up in something and it'll upset me. And, really, that's not what life is about. And it's that idea of like not sweating the small stuff.
You know what? You are so right. And I don't want to give you or anyone listening the false assumption that nothing ever bothers me because I forget those lessons that I learned. And sometimes I find myself being human and swirling around some stew in my head about something. And then I have to step back and remind myself about those people I took care of in the middle of the night at Rush Hospital in Chicago, or even the people I take care of now who have ended up in the hospital with a broken hip, or an athlete. I'm a sports doctor that this is all they've known and they just had a career-ending injury. I have to just step back and remember that it's not so bad, is it?
It's true. Perspective. You, as you mentioned, are an orthopedic surgeon and you do a lot in allowing people to know about aging. And you say something that I think everyone should hear, which is that aging is not a decline. And I want you to talk to that because, when I heard you say that, I thought, thank God, I'm on the other side. I'm going the other side now. I used to be, on the younger side, but as what happens in life to all of us is we do age. But why do you believe that to be true?
Well, I have a couple thoughts. What you're referring to is I always say that there's a myth. It's such a myth that aging is an inevitable decline from the vitality of youth. down a slippery slope to frailty and that there's nothing we can do about it. I say that's a myth because I truly believe to the depth of my heart that we can be healthy, vital, active, joyful long into the foreseeable future. But there's a gap. There's a gap between what will happen to us if we are not mindful, intentional, purposeful with how we treat ourselves every day versus if we are intentional, if we believe we are worth the daily investment in our health, if we take the time to notice that our bodies are not a garbage dump that we just put anything in. So I do believe that it's a myth that we have to decline, but I also believe that we must work for it. But I think my perspective comes on aging from a few things. Number one, from the minute of our conception to the very moment of our death, every single second, every single day, we are aging. It is nature's most remarkable and natural, I'm air quoting, natural part of being alive. Aging is normal. God, I wouldn't want to be a baby anymore, but if we didn't age, we would all be. Or, I wouldn't want to be 25 anymore. It was good when it lasted, but I don't want to do that again. So that's why my perspective on aging is if we get to age, what a privilege it is, because lots of my patients, when I was a young 23-year-old nurse, did not get to age. And so aging can be remarkable if we step in front of it. And so when I first started my career at the University of Pittsburgh as an orthopedic surgeon, I went about to prove that we could really impact how we age, because a lot of the studies that have been published on aging are population studies, meaning they just take a cohort of people, they watch what happens to them and say, oh, that's what aging is. But what do we know about average cohorts of people? In the United States, 70% of all people do not invest every day in their health and mobility. They treat their bodies as garbage disposals, eating processed foods that are on all of our grocery shelves. So, of course, if you allow yourself to age that way, there's going to be consequences. But I studied master's age athletes, meaning they were 50 and above, who were not professional athletes. They were mere mortal athletes like me. I do Spartan races, I work out a lot, but not professionally, right? These people proved in a series of studies that we can retain our muscle mass, we can retain our bone density, we can keep our brains healthy, that we do not slow down until we're in our mid-70s. And it really pivots the perspective from, oh my God, there's this inevitable terribleness coming, to I can get in front of this if I do get in front of this, right?
You mentioned brain health just then. What do you believe in what you've seen through your patients and the work that you've done is the best way for someone to maintain good brain health, especially as they do get older?
I think there's a few ways, actually. Mobility every day, whether that's, I currently teach people to do mobility on two ends of the spectrum, meaning doing 80% of our cardio work in base training, which is a lower heart rate, 65 to 70% of your maximum heart rate. Or I happen to have the privilege of working in a place that has a metabolic lab. So I can actually measure when your metabolism switches from very efficient to less efficient and work you out in that heart rate range 80% of the time. So for me, I just got out of the gym. I'm kind of in gym clothes right now. For me, that's 130 beats per minute for 45 minutes, right? Doesn't seem like you're doing much, but you are building your heart and therefore building your brain. The other 20% of the time, we're sprinting our guts out. And that doesn't mean running on a treadmill. That happens to be how I do it, but it can be rowing and alpine ski machine, or it can be biking, just as so we get our heart rate up near the maximum. That kind of working out is amazing for the brain. But you know what else is amazing for the brain is lifting weights, right? Muscle contraction really causes the transcription of a longevity protein called clotho, which travels to many organs in the body, including the brain, and keeps them relatively biologically younger. Even things like, what's so fascinating, I'm an orthopedic surgeon and I deal with bones a lot. Bones, which people think of as merely hanging out, being structural components of our body. No, they secrete hormones called osteocalcin that go to the brain and help you make new neurons. And so all mobility, whether it's cardio or lifting, is critically important for brain health.
That's so good to know. I wonder, when it comes to physical mobility, a lot of us are obviously sitting down for majority of the day, dependent on your job, but I feel that majority of people are sitting. I know for myself, I sit for what seems like 90% of the day. And, there was a phase there where I think even from looking at the phone, I got such a sore neck, was always getting the sore neck, even like we're on a screen, I'm looking at you. There'll be times where I'm like, God, my neck is so sore. Yeah. And I wonder, for those people that are sitting a lot, what is the best way to be able to get that movement within their day as well?
Yeah, I have a couple ideas for you. If you're physically capable in your office, I suggest moving your laptop higher so that you can, or set up a couple egg crates or get one of the fancy standing desks so that you can do your non-deep work. Now, I get it. If you're trying to do really deep thinking, solve world peace, you may not be able to do that standing up. But you can answer any phone call. You can reply to emails. You can do busy work standing. Or even better than a standing desk is a walking pad that you put under your desk. And so that's become very common amongst my crowd of people, is to have a walking pad. You pull it out, you do your busy work while walking. If you're not capable of that, you work in a formal office, then every hour, if you set some kind of alarm or whatever, to do 10 chair squats, or to do 2 to 5 minutes of wall squats. Or I challenge boardrooms of people to take the chairs away from the table and everybody wall squat for the duration of the meeting. I guarantee you it'll get that agenda going faster. But those are all ways to work mobility into your day. If you don't want a chair squat, how about just every flight of stairs is 17 steps? Just go up and down that for 10 minutes. And studies have shown that those little bites of exercise are actually incredibly beneficial.
What do you think of supplements? There's something that I never took, and I've only started taking more recently, and I'm taking now zinc. I just found a really good collagen, especially if I do hard workouts. I'll take some sort of magnesium, and I have always had low iron. So those are the things that I'm taking. And vitamin D, so surprisingly enough, I've always been a lot of high vitamin D, because I do spend quite a bit of time outside. I wonder, tell us what you think about supplements and what is good for people who are within that kind of midlife phase of their life.
Yes, you know what? My first statement about supplements is that we should try everything to get our nutrients from whole food. We should try our best not to just take a handful of pills in lieu of good quality protein, green leafy vegetables, because compound foods, meaning broccoli has so many of these nutrients that we need, or your kale or spinach, any of those things, all compound, all in one place, as nature intended, right? So number one, let's not substitute good whole food for a handful of supplements. Number one. Number two is I'm not against supplements. I'm going to tell you what I take and what I recommend to people, but I just think you have to be very careful where you get them.
Yes, agreed.
Yes, it's a completely unregulated industry. You never know what's in those capsules you're taking, the handful of capsules you're taking. So you need to get them from a reputable laboratory that's been third-party tested and retested, so that you know that what you think you're getting in a batch is what you're getting. And if you're a competing athlete at any level, you have to be extra careful for those who may be listening. And I'm sure you know that, because you don't know what's in that stuff. And you could be tested by WADA and fail very innocently. So for people competing that get drug tested, you have to be even more careful. So those are the two things. But then, okay, the truth of the matter is many of us are deficient in things, or we need extra things that we just don't get enough of. So you may be one of the first people I've ever met that have good vitamin D levels. Most of us have terrible low vitamin D levels. If we're out in the sun, we're wearing sunscreen, or we never go out. So most of my people, including myself, need vitamin D. We take it with K2 to help absorption. I like all of my people to be on magnesium, 500 milligrams. I'd advise them to take it at night because it'll help you sleep. There are lots of kinds of magnesium, but in general, magnesium citrate is what we use in the hospital for GI problems. So if you don't want GI problems, I might choose another kind. L-threonate and glycinate are the two most common magnesium. So vitamin D with K2, magnesium, omega-3. Most of us don't eat enough good fish, and so omega-3 is amazing. If we want to add extra things to our bones, we could do zinc or strontium. Zinc is also very good for skin. Collagen. There's a lot of good data about collagen. There's a lot of bad data about collagen. So if my patients come to me on it, I say, well, as long as it's a good quality collagen, I'm not going to tell you to stop. But in general, the data is plus minus. I have to be honest with you. There are a lot of other kinds of longevity type supplements. Literally, the lists are hundreds and hundreds long. You could take things like fisetin and quercetin to get rid of cells in your body called senescent cells, which are badly aging cells. They're neither good cells nor dead cells. They're just aging badly. So those are two that I like for that. I like people to get enough B vitamins, either in their food or as vitamins, because B vitamins are critical for energy supply in our bodies. So I try to keep it simple. I do not prescribe hundreds of vitamins for people. We talk a lot about smart nutrition.
I agree with you about the smart nutrition point as well. Magnesium, though, that has been a lifesaver, especially if you start doing like harder workouts and, if you're lifting and things like that. But another point about magnesium, which is interesting for people to know, I remember when I was pregnant, actually with both of my kids, I'm little and obviously your stomach gets bigger and bigger. It's a lot of weight. And I got restless leg, and I'd never had that before because there was so much weight from my stomach and not much weight on anywhere else. And I took magnesium and I did the powder, really high grade, good quality, and it went away instantaneously.
Wow, that's great. Well, it has that effect on smooth muscle, actually.
Yeah.
And so for people who have smooth muscle illnesses like musculosclerosis or myasthenia gravis, it's actually not good for them because it relaxes their muscles more. But for people without that is exactly right.
Yeah. So some of those, they are so unbelievably effective. I wonder now, talking about exercise, so I'd like you to talk about why strength training is so important, and especially for women going through menopause and things like that and wanting to take care of themselves and their bodies.
Yeah. So, let's talk about muscle and the effects of losing our estrogen. So just as a brief review, I'm sure your listeners know that when we are 40, we are born with all the eggs in our ovaries we're ever going to have. And every month as we cycle, 500 or so are lost. Even though we only use one every month, 500 or so are lost. So by the time we're 40, we only have about 1% of our eggs left. And it is when an egg is ruptured from the ovary, it's the remaining tissue that helps produce estrogen. And so with so few eggs left, our estrogen starts to decline. And therefore, we enter a perimenopausal state where it's just declining. And with that, and we don't talk that often about it, we also start declining in our testosterone. Both estrogen and testosterone are critical as anabolic, meaning building stimulation in our body. Without that, we can lose 15 to 20% of our bone density in the 5 to 7 years around perimenopause. Same with our muscle mass, because we no longer have estrogen as a stimulant for muscle protein synthesis. So what do we do to get in front of that? Because here's what happens. Because I am still an orthopedic surgeon practicing every day, I still see this. I see women in their 70th and 80th decade come in with hip fractures. Women sustain 70% of all hip fractures in the world. When that happens, 50% of the time, they will not return to pre-fall function, and 30% will die. So we cannot allow that to happen. Well, getting in front of that frailty by building muscle, I think women should start, if not before. I call 40s the decade to get it's a critical decade. It's the decade to get our proverbial health shit together. Because as estrogen walks out the door and slams it behind her at 52 on average, it's harder and harder. So while you still have some estrogen, let's start lifting heavy weights. Now, why do I and many other people at this point say lift heavy weights? Well, because it takes that degree of stimulation, that anabolic stimulation, meaning working really hard to build muscle mass, because estrogen's not there as a stimulant anymore, right? Women have been taught for many years to lift really light weights, a lot of repetitions, and God forbid we ever build muscle. We don't want to get heavy. You're not going to get heavy and bulky unless that is your goal. And that takes a lot more work than most of us put in. But to build muscle mass, we need to lift heavy. And so this is how I define it. There's a range of lifts, but I have found over the years people like to be told exactly what to do. So four reps, 4 sets. Now 4 reps means it's really heavy. What it means is you can do 4. You could probably squeeze out 1 more rep in reserve with good form, but you're not getting to 6 or 7. It's that heavy. And so that intimidates people. They're like, oh, what if I get hurt? I've never lifted before. Well, you're right. You're right. It takes a little bit of time to learn the technique to safely lift that heavy. It may take you 6 months if you're just stepping off the couch, but it is worth investing the time. It is worth foregoing buying something frivolous and hiring a strength and conditioning coach to teach you the form you need. Because what we're trying to get to is a lifestyle of lifting heavy, a minimum of 2 days a week, but ultimately 4. And so, I mean, honestly, that's the way I do it. I don't have time to be in the gym 3 hours a day. So I lift a little bit most days and get it in.
You know, I do 2 weight sessions a week with a personal trainer, and I love it. Like, love it. It is my most favorite thing to do. I like it more than cardio sessions. And to your point, Vonda, it's all about like lifting heavy weights. And if anyone's worried about getting big, they can look at me, because I'm the furthest thing from big. And like, it's fun. It's so fun to see how you go from, you know, starting off not being able to lift that much and then getting better and better, and then really feelings from a psychological perspective, like, wow, like I'm able to lift like way more than what I weigh, and that's like a really cool feeling. And yeah.
Doesn't it make you feel a little bit invincible? Like,
yes.
I am such a badass. I can lift more than, literally. And it gives you this security. Really?
Yeah.
Don't you feel like you could get out of a bad situation because at least you can lift yourself over something? Or, I mean, there's a you feel safer. You feel like a badass. You feel more capable. And you know what? There is nothing wrong with the fact that building muscle is nature's Spanx.
Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah.
It's funny you say that. The other day, I looked at my legs and I said to someone, like, I've got these like things in my, like, just above my knee, and they're like, that's muscle.
Muscles.
That's muscle. And I was like, I've never had that muscle before. Oh my
I
God,
love that for
hallelujah.
you. I know. I love that for you.
It's so good. So, I really encourage weights for any woman. It's like I said, it's fun. You get a good, if you can afford it, you get a good trainer. And there are a lot of amazing trainers out there, and sometimes they're not as expensive. You'll end up going to classes and sometimes paying just as much. So it's definitely worth the investment, as you mentioned.
Absolutely. And you know what? It doesn't have to be forever. In fact, if you're more of
Yes.
a do-it-yourself person, then hire a strength conditioning coach to teach you.
Yes.
And then you could buy an online to an app, but you'll know the technique.
Mm.
But if you just walk into a gym, you've never been here before, it's easy to feel intimidated with all the grunting people throwing weight around. So you will feel so comfortable if you just get a short introduction. And I'm sorry, it may be that you don't get the fancy new purse for Christmas because you're going to get a great strength coach for 6 sessions or something. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? But it's worth
totally.
it.
It's worth it. I've heard you say something which gives us all a lot of hope if we're still in between this age. But 40 to 63, we are able to course correct. But after 63, you say it's a little bit harder. Can you talk to us about that?
You know, what you're referring to is the life expectancy of women on average in the world is about 80 years. For men, it's less. Men live about 4 to 6 years less than women.
Really?
And yeah, they
How
do. They
come?
die young. Because we're superior genetic. No, I don't know.
We
You
can
know
think
what?
that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That is exactly anyway. Yeah, we live longer, but we suffer longer. That's why I want women to get in front of this. So if
Yeah.
our life expectancy is about 80 years, research shows that that's our lifespan. Our health span is only 63, meaning that the diseases we die of, metabolic diseases, diabetes, uh, heart attack, hypertension, stroke, all the bad things. We may carry those diagnoses, but at 63 on average is when they get so bad that we're spending 3 days a week in a doctor's office. It doesn't have to be that way. We can get in front of it. We can get in front of it after 63. It's just harder. It's harder because uh, our second wave of aging happens from a molecular level at 60. We haven't had estrogen for at least a decade by then. And if we haven't decided to do HRT, that's hard to get over. Now, that being said, your body, my body, our bodies are designed to rise to the strategic stress we put on it. So even if you're 63 and you haven't stepped away from the couch in 40 years, if you learn to step away from the couch by just getting up off the couch and walking every day, and then when you're feeling mobile enough, get into a gym where we're just doing weight bearing body weight exercises, I'm not really kidding you. Your body will respond in 90 days, in 6 months. In fact, some of the very first aging studies that were ever done on function were done in 90-year-old men in nursing homes. And they just taught them to do chair exercises, and their function increased 150%. So there is never an age or a skill level when your body will not respond to the positive strategic stress you put on it. But when you hear me say the difference between trying it at 63 and trying it at 40, it has to do with the fact that our health span, if we don't do anything about it, usually ends at 63. So it's just a call to action. You know, when I say things like this, I never say this as woe me, oh, woe is me, gloom and doom, life is over. No, I talk about this as a call to action. That's what I see perimenopause as. If never before now you paid attention to your health, etc. This is a call to action, to stop looking over our shoulder and worshiping our youth, to stop saying things like, oh my God, in high school, I did all this. Could we please pivot our entire mindset and mobilize to the future? Because at 40, it's likely that you have a half of your life left. We're not just coasting downhill. We are continuing to build.
How does a person know if they're in perimenopause? Because I feel like half of my conversations with my girlfriends are like, I don't know if I'm in it. Maybe I'm in it. I'm so angry these days. It's, but who knows? I mean, when you just get your period regularly, you can feel like that too. So what are some of the indicators for people to realize if they're in perimenopause?
You know what? At this point, there are about 74 signs and symptoms of perimenopause. One of the most common things people say that is pretty non-specific but pretty consistent is, oh my God, I don't know what's going on, but all I know is I don't feel like myself anymore. Something has changed. And what that is wild fluctuations in your estrogen or less estrogen. Something has changed. And then you might start having things like the very common things that everybody recognizes: hot flashes, night sweats, brain fog. Things people don't recognize are things like your hair gets brittle and starts falling out. You start growing chin hairs you never friggin' had before. And you're like, where did this come from out of the blue? I'll never remember. I was still in training. I trained for a long time. And I was in Chicago getting a facial, and this lady's doing my face, and she plucks one out. She's like, oh, hun, that's your hormones. And at the like, I don't care what it is, get it out. I didn't know. But, things like that. Or I just wrote a paper recently called the musculoskeletal syndrome of menopause, because things like out of nowhere, you gain 30 pounds, like you didn't change a thing. And all of a sudden, that happened to me, packing on adipose tissue that I never had before. You feel weaker. Your body aches. There's this, due to the inflammation that we get during perimenopause, our whole body aches. Many women come into me out of nowhere. They didn't hit their shoulder on the bedroom door. They didn't fall down, but all of a sudden their shoulder doesn't move anymore, and it's excruciating, frozen shoulder. It's a very common thing. If you are starting not to feel like yourself, if your sleep has gone berserk, and it's not because of your children, right? Right. I mean, I had my last child late, so I was kind of catching up on that. But if your children are sleeping, they're not keeping you up anymore, and suddenly you can't sleep anymore, you might be in perimenopause, especially if you're in your mid-40s, 45, 46. I have so many midlife women who come to me because their shoulders hurt and they don't know they're in perimenopause. And as they're talking to me, they say things like, because I do a lot of listening in my clinic and let people talk. I believe that patients will tell you what's wrong with them if you just let them talk and don't interrupt them all the time. They'll say to me things, you know what? I don't know what's happening, but I feel like I'm falling apart. And you know what? I feel like I'm going crazy because nothing is the same. And I say to them, you're not falling apart and you're not going crazy. You may be angry all the time, but you're not going crazy. You're in perimenopause. And people feel so relieved because there's a reason. They're just not bad people. You're not a bad person. You're just going through wild hormonal changes. And I like to remind people, remember what it was like when you went through your adolescence? You're this happy-go-lucky 10-year-old, life is grand, blah, blah, blah. And suddenly you're a brooding 12-year-old and nothing feels the same, and you hate your parents and you just wish that your body would settle down. Well, this is the reverse of that. So I made up this word that I'm socializing now. Just like we went through adolescence, which was a biological, a psychological, a hormonal, a social, cataclysmic transition from child to young adult, the menolescence, this period of time that is physical, psychological, hormonal, and social, when we go from our reproductive years to the rest of our life, is a cataclysmic transition. And we need to give ourselves a break. We need to say, give ourselves some grace. We are going through the second biggest transition in our entire lives. And we're going to be better soon if we educate ourselves, if we make smart lifestyle decisions, if we make our hormonal decision, right? So I can't even remember what your question was, but
No,
it
it was
prompted me to
how do you
say,
know,
yeah,
you've answered it. How do you know
perimenopause.
and do people then
Yeah.
just go and see a doctor, to seek treatment if they're having any of those things, those symptoms?
Yeah. So the first thing I think you need to do is become um, menopause literate. You need to pursue this information with the same vigor you would if you were buying a house, buying a car, helping cure your child of an illness, right? You deserve that kind of vigor of education. And so there are some very good, trustworthy doctors online. I mean, I love Mary Claire Haver. I love
Mm,
Louise Newsom. I'm online. We have Kelly Casperson and a bevy of other people who actually still take care of the patients and are either researchers themselves or um, put the research together in actionable ways. So number one, become literate. Number two, seek out a doctor who understands menopause. If you go to a doctor and they say something curt to you like, well, it's just part of aging, just get over it, it's part of it, then you just need to walk out and find a
yeah.
doctor who will listen to you. You don't deserve to be treated that way. And that just may be the fact that they don't know. And you know
Mm,
what? Let's give my peers a little bit of a break. This is not taught in medical school.
yeah.
There are very few fellowship programs in menopause. So most of us are completely self-taught.
Mm,
Taught. I have read volumes of literature, and there's not enough research on this. Uh, I saw this recently. There's 1.1 million papers on infertility. There's 98,000 papers on menopause. There's only 6,000 papers on perimenopause. So we have
mm,
so much more research to do to even know how to treat women better. So women need to self-educate. They need to search until they find a doctor that can help them. And there are many telemedicine health doctors right now. And then we need to be ambassadors to each other. You need to gather your group of girlfriends. Just talk this out. There's no
mm.
shame in talking about our skin changes, our gynae changes, what we're feeling. Because if we can normalize the conversation and use anatomic words like my vulva and my vagina are shriveling up, what am I going to do about it? And someone may say to you, well, that's the gynecourinary syndrome of menopause, and you need vaginal estrogen. You should not suffer in silence, but we can
Mm.
only collaborate together if we talk about it.
That's such good advice. And I love how you said it's, the similar journey of when, a child goes through to
Mm-hmm.
become a teenager, their adolescent, because my son is 11, he's turning 12 next
Yeah.
week. And I'm like, why is he suddenly talking back to me and getting angry? And
I know.
like, this is not my child that I'm used to. And someone was like, it's
Where's
because
my sweet boy?
he's becoming a teenager and they have hormones and their mood changes,
Yeah.
which is exactly what you're saying about, people who are going through
Yes.
perimenopause. And, as we know, because we've all been teenagers and we come out okay. So once those
Yes.
hormones stabilize a bit, it's only upwards.
Yeah, I just want to encourage you, Sarah. We have a lot of boys. He will come back.
Yeah.
You will still be his lovey mommy. He will come back.
I hope I'll still be the love of
Yeah.
his life like I was a couple of years
Yes.
ago.
Yes.
I want to talk to you now about stretching because I know that's
Okay.
something that we don't do enough. And
Mhm.
I did something really silly to myself many years ago when I was probably ending the school years to probably early 20s. All I used to do, and we didn't have the information like, the people like you who are telling us all this wonderful information. All I used to do is run, right? So I think 5 days a week, I just ran 6K here, 7K there. I wasn't training for anything. I just thought this is a good way of keeping my
Yeah.
body lean, da-da-da. And what did it happen? I sustained a lot of injuries, and because I never stretched, I can't even touch my toes properly. And people always will be like, oh my God, how come you can't do that? And it gets to the point where I actually feel quite embarrassed about it because it's the years and years of just running on the road and really not stretching. So stretching is important for everyone, especially as they age. What should we be doing?
So I'm glad you brought this up, because when I prescribe exercise to people, I prescribe 4 things, actually, 4 categories. And I use an acronym called FACE, just to help people remember. So I ask them to face, FACE, their future. The first F is flexibility and mobility, right? So it's not only about our muscles being flexible, it's about our joints having full ranges of motion. We want our joints to, our knees to fully bend, our hips to fully move. We don't want to be the old shuffly person that doesn't have a stride or is injured more. So we start out every exercise session with dynamic warm up, meaning we just do a series of short exercises where we move all of our joints through a full range of motion, with hip circles, with low back stretches. I can't show you because I'm sitting at a desk right now, but you get the point that we're just going to spend 15 or 20 minutes getting our blood going, putting all of our joints through a range of motion. And then if we know, for instance, we have tight hips, I did this today. I felt the front of my hips getting tight. So I did some mobility work on my hips, meaning I needed to open them up. I did some deep squats with my, like you see people who are working in field squatting really deep. That's actually amazing for opening up your hips and your knees and your ankles. And then I needed some more hip work. So I did something called 90-90, which is just, it moves your hips through full ranges of motion. We need to do that every day. It doesn't take much. And in fact, if you want to do it in a more structured way, take some yoga or Pilates classes. That is where those kinds of activities will be critical in the flexibility and mobility. Because you're right, as we age, our baseline inflexibility becomes worse because the covalent bonds between the collagen tissues gets tighter. So you just get stiffer with age. So that's F. A is aerobic. We talked about that already, my 80-20 method. C stands for carry a load. That is lifting heavy. We want to carry a load with our bodies. And E, the thing you might not have, the F and the E are the things we never talk about: flexibility, mobility. A and C we talk about, but E is equilibrium and agility. Because after 20, the neuromuscular pathways between our brain and our muscles can degrade and we'll lose our balance. I mean, lots of young people I get into my office can't balance on one foot. Well, running is a single leg sport. Anytime we reach over for something and lose our balance, we are vulnerable to fall. The good news is we can completely retrain our balance. As simply as, stand on one leg while you're brushing your teeth, so that the movement of your arm forces you to engage your ears, your eyes, your core to balance. The other component of that is agility, which is meaning just foot speed. I always give the example of when I rush in and sit down at my desk when I am now, I dump my work bag right next to me. Well, then when I'm in an equal rush to get up and go see a patient, I trip over my bag but I have really quick feet because I work on my agility. So I just hop over it and go. But if I get lots of people coming in who have tripped over their dog or tripped over their rug or their kid's shoe that was left in the middle of the floor, and we're one fall away from a disaster. So all 4 components, flexibility and mobility, aerobic, carrying a load, and equilibrium and balance, are critical.
When people have hip fractures, why is there such a decline in health afterwards and a lot of time mortality?
Well, the reason after a hip fracture, 70% of which happen in women, 30% in men, there's a high level of mortality is several reasons. Number one, for most people who fracture their hips, they're already in their 70s, 80s, and beyond. So they carry with them a lot of disease. They come in very debilitated. So that's a reason. But number two, laying in bed for any amount of time, especially when you're that old, can lead to fluid in your lungs. It's called atelectasis, which can turn into pneumonia. It can subject you to infections, because if we're not great nutritionally, and many old people are not full of protein and very nutritionally sound, then they're more subject to infection. Sometimes because they have such poor nutrition, they don't heal well, right? And finally, they have such low fitness reserve, meaning if you're not actively working on staying fit and healthy and you're sedentary most of your life, you have a very low VO2 max or total fitness level, and it's just very difficult to recover. So all those things add up. So they may have been doing fine, just coasting along in their really low state, but this giant insult, this metabolic insult, this healing insult, this stress insult just tips them over the edge. I like to phrase it like this. This is a simple analogy. They have no health savings account. They're living paycheck to paycheck when it comes to their health, and one big trauma, and it tips them over the edge.
You've spoken about nutrition quite a bit, as in you've brought it up about how important good food is. And I want to talk about that. I know that you are not a fan of sugar. I'm not either. I understand that it's really not good for you. But yet I think a lot of people get that and they still eat it. Can you talk to us about what sort of foods we should be eating to fuel our body and why sugar isn't great for us?
Of course. So I say this from the point of view that I love sugar. I do. I'm a sweet person. I prefer sweet over savory. That being said, I make the disciplined decision that when I eat carbs, they are going to be fiber-filled carbs. Our gut microbiome needs fiber to be healthy. Fiber is very slow digesting and does not cause sugar spikes, which then will literally cook us from the inside out and cause our body to store sugar as fat. Those are all the reasons that when I encourage people, I mean, we need to eat carbs. I'm not saying you can't eat carbs. I'm saying choose complex carbs, high fiber carbs, number one. Number two, to the tune of women need 30 grams of fiber a day. It's not easy. You have to consciously get that much fiber in. Number two, which is really number one to me, we must eat enough protein, not only to maintain a healthy health reserve, but also to build muscle mass, right? One of the priorities in midlife is to build muscle mass. Well, you have to eat enough high quality protein to do that. So what is that? That is 1 gram of high quality protein per pound of ideal body weight. So that's a lot, right? I aim for 130 grams of protein a day. If you're on average, women, at least in the United States, eat about 60 to 80 a day. I'm asking people to almost double that, but that's what your body needs, because otherwise you can work as hard as you want in the gym and you're not going to build muscle. So I'll give an example of what that looks like today in my life, right? Because I think it's hard to conceptualize. I want to frame this by every meal does not have to be a gourmet presentation. Food is fuel. We're just trying to fuel this amazing body we have. And then once in a while, you can have this gorgeous gourmet presentation. Every single morning, I start out with an omelet made from a cup of egg whites. And people always ask me, what do you have against eggs? Nothing, but it takes 6 eggs to get 30 grams of protein. And I don't want that much fat from the egg yolks. I also have nothing against egg yolks, but I want to get my fat from avocados or healthy oil. So a cup of egg whites, about 60 grams of sourdough carbs, right? I bake my own sourdough. It's very healthy. And then 60 grams, which is about 2 handfuls of spinach sauteed for a little fiber, a little thing in my gut. And then a half an avocado, which has great fat. That is my breakfast. It gives me 30 grams of protein. At lunch, I eat some kind of salad or some kind of vegetable left over from the day before, and a chicken breast the size of my hand. Every ounce of lean protein has 6 grams of, every ounce of protein, every ounce of meat, sorry, I'll get it. Every ounce of meat, no matter what it comes from, has 6 grams of protein. So if the piece of meat is about the size of my hand, that's 30 to 40 grams. So we get 30 at breakfast, 30 at lunch. Around 10:30 in the morning, if I'm working, I will either eat a cup of Greek yogurt, which has 16 grams of protein, a couple really unprocessed beef sticks. There's a couple brands of beef sticks that are very little processed. And you take a couple of those, and so you get another 30 grams in the middle of the morning, but not with a high volume of food. Because one of the problems, people are like, I can't eat that much.
Yeah, it's too much. Yeah.
It's too much. In the afternoon, because I work out in the afternoon, about an hour before I work out, I just gulp down 30 grams of whey protein isolate and 20 ounces of water. It's not high volume, but it's high protein. And then at dinner, you just eat 30 grams of protein. So it's 3 meals, but just 2 high protein snacks.
That's so interesting, because I think that's right. What people get scared about is like, well, this is too much food. I'm going to put on so much weight. Like, my body's not used to eating so much food. So thank you for sharing that, because that shows that you can still get a lot of protein without eating this enormous amount of food. But I wonder, do you eat any fruit? Because I know that is, rich in sugar.
So I treat fruit as dessert. I eat blueberries whenever I want to eat blueberries, especially big fat ones that kind of pop when you eat them. They're so delightful. But I don't eat fruit. I never eat fruit first, because it's just sugar. It's nature's sugar. And please, people, I'm so sorry to say this, do not drink juice.
Yeah.
If you want fruit, eat the fruit so that you get the fiber. But if you drink the juice, and please don't give it to your babies, if you drink the juice, it's 500 calories of pure sugar.
I mean, surely we're better educated than what the 80s and 90s parents. I was drinking juice when I was little, and my mum, bless her, used to put half water, half juice to make it not as strong. But I hope to God that we know better than that now. So thank you for sharing that.
I don't say that to shame our mothers. I don't. They didn't know any better. It was the way it was done. But please don't do that today.
Yes, that is so true. I wonder, Vonda, what is some of the best advice that you have ever been given?
That I have been given? Well, it doesn't have much to do with medicine. The best advice I've ever been given doesn't have to do with medicine. When I was starting out my career, the best piece of advice I got, and I think probably you and your listeners will identify with this, I'm a really high capacity person. I can get a lot done in a short amount of time. I think a lot of women and lots of men, I don't want to leave the men out of this, or that way. But I got this advice from the president of Pfizer, who I had come in contact with through some consulting I had done. And I said, what would you tell someone like me just starting out in my career? And he said, Vonda, people like you will always be asked to do a lot of things. And here's what you must do. You must identify where you want to be in 5 years and where you think you want to be in 10 years. And unless the busy work somebody asks you to do aligns with that, you must say no. Because here's what happens. Sometimes we're such people pleasers. We'll say, yes, I'll do that thing. I'll do that thing. Yes, 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 yes. When really what we're saying in our brains is, no, I don't want to do that thing. But I want to make you happy, so I'll do that thing. And so instead of each brick of a project, whether it's personal or work, whether that brick, fits together to build a monument depends on how you choose your bricks. Otherwise, you're just going to end up with a pile of projects or a pile of yeses. No is a complete sentence. It doesn't mean you hate the person who's asking you to do something. It just means you're choosing to build a monument and not just accumulate a pile of bricks.
That's really great advice. What is the lesson that either you're still learning or has taken you the longest to learn?
Well, I don't know if lesson is the right word, but there are 3 words that there's a statement, and then there are 3 words that are kind of informing this time in my life, right? I am way past midlife. I've done a lot of good things in my life, and I've learned a lot of lessons from my failures. And my mantra now has shifted from, in my younger days, my mantra was taken from opera singers. Opera singers going on stage will say in Italian to each other, the person going on stage, someone will say to that person, in bocca al lupo, which translates to in the mouth of the wolf. You're going in the mouth of the wolf. You're going into life, this really stressful thing. And the opera singer who's about to go on stage will respond, crepe lupo, which means slay the wolf. So this angst of I am going out to attack and I'm going into the mouth of the wolf, and the response is slay the fucking wolf or slay whatever. You can delete my swear words, but that's what I carried with me through my youth. I was going to prove something. I'm a female orthopedic surgeon. I'm going to slay this wolf. I have come to a place and learned so many lessons, both from self-reflection and from people who have mentored me, that now my mantra for life is I was created for such a time as this. Every day there's an opportunity to live into my fullest potential because I was created for this. And I have arrived at this place in my life perfectly. It wasn't a perfect ride, but I got here perfectly. And so I'm living in this atmosphere right now of I am ageless. I do not know really what it means to be 57. I am creating my own pathway. I will be my version of 57 and eventually 60 and 67. I am ageless. I am the most authentic I've ever been in my life, meaning this is it. This is Vonda. I have brought with me the wisdom of my age and my experiences, and I am happy to live in this authenticity. And do you know what? This is a superpower. I am unshakable right there. This is a superpower to live in authenticity. And it makes me, and those of us who feel this way, indefinable. You know, you can't put me in a box. Don't tell me what I'm supposed to be. I'll tell you who I have become and who I am supposed to be. And so this is the best time of life. I mean, I tell people who have not yet turned 40, I'm like, you just wait. It is going to get so good.
I love that. I wonder, knowing everything you do about medicine and your life experiences, we've talked about so many things that are amazing today, but I wonder, what is the one thing, if people could take away with them today about their health, longevity, what is the key bit of wisdom that you could leave with them?
I want everybody listening to understand the 2 things we started out this interview with, which were aging is not an inevitable decline from vitality to frailty. That aging is nature's most natural process. But to age well, to live the life you envision to the very last moment, it takes an intentional input every day. But here's the key message I want people to walk away with. Here's the key message I want people to walk away with. You are worth the daily investment in your health. You are worth it. Because until you believe that, you may run around piling up bricks, doing everybody else's work, investing in everybody else's life, because inside you believe they're more important than what you need. You are worth the daily investment in your health. And when you truly understand this, then everything else will fall into place.
And our final question, Vonda, what is a life of greatness to you?
Oh, I think that's a really hard question. I've never been asked, what is a life of greatness? I think greatness, everybody would define it differently. If I've lived a great life, if Vonda Wright has lived a great life, I will have contributed to the lives of multiple people. I will have raised a healthy family full of happy children. And I happen to have a happy spouse, to have a core group of relationships that I'm proud of. That would have been greatness, to contribute to others, to contribute to the people I love the most, and hopefully leave behind me a body of research that continues in a legacy way to contribute in the future.
Vonda Wright, I have loved this conversation so much. You are so full of deep wisdom, and thank you for bringing a lot of topics to the limelight that I think are not only so important, but really haven't been spoken about so much. They're going to help so many people. So thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been an honor. And I love that you let me talk about so many great things.